Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Conde. I have the great honour and pleasure of being Chairman of the Sydney Symphony, and it's my further pleasure to welcome you here today for the announcement of the orchestra's next Chief Conductor. We're honoured greatly today by the presence of the Federal Minister for the Arts, the Honourable Simon Crean. And Minister, I thank you most warmly for being with us and for fitting this engagement into your schedule. A few years ago, a reviewer here present mentioned that he hoped a particular American conductor was high on the list of potential candidates to become the Sydney Symphony's next chief. And only 2 weeks ago, the same reviewer made similar hypothetical remarks. Okay. I'm pleased to let you know today that wish will indeed come true. And starting in January 2014, for a term of 5 years, the Sydney Symphony's new Chief Conductor and Artistic Director will be Mr. David Robertson. Thank you. This is a hugely exciting appointment for the Sydney Symphony and, dare I say, for Australia. David is an incredible musician, and the musicians of the Sydney Symphony have great respect for him, which I'm sure Catherine Hewgill will expand upon shortly. So, why David Robertson? Well, the Sydney Symphony is at a point in its life where we are keen to expand our international presence, especially in the Asia region, and extend and challenge the way classical music is presented to our current and new audiences. It became clear from the outset that David shared these same ambitions and that he was keen to undertake major artistic projects with us that would put the Sydney Symphony at the forefront of inventiveness in the classical music world. The projects we will undertake with David's leadership include many new initiatives for the Sydney Symphony, and at this stage, these include an annual opera in concert project incorporating multimedia and involving major international partners, co-commissioning partnerships for the creation of major new orchestral works by Australian and international composers, including collaborations with some of the world's major orchestras, such as the Royal Concertgebouw, annual international touring with a particular focus on China, building a strong collaborative relationship with Asia, both through touring and associated outreach activities such as masterclasses and musician exchanges, collaborations with other performing arts companies in Australia, and a multimedia project for international release each year. And on top of these exciting projects, we will of course be focused on music making of the highest calibre with some of the world's leading performers. David will add to the tradition of inviting high-profile guest artists to appear with the Sydney Symphony. I would also like to make mention of our current Principal Conductor and Artistic Advisor, Mr. Vladimir Ashkenazy. The first 3 years of Mr. Ashkenazy's 5-year appointment have really flown by so quickly, but what a wonderful leadership he continues to provide. The relationship with Mr. Ashkenazy has been a stellar association for our musicians, our audiences, and for the growth of our international profile. This has been a vital relationship, and one that I'm delighted to say will continue beyond the end of 2013, with Mr. Ashkenazy continuing to spend time with us, conducting the orchestra each year from 2014 onwards. This is an exciting time for the Sydney Symphony. As we celebrate our 80th anniversary, we honour the past, we celebrate the excellence of the present, and we look confidently to the future with David Robertson, a conductor with the vision, intellect, and musical credentials to take the Sydney Symphony further on its journey. Before we take questions, I acknowledge again how delighted and honoured we are to have the Minister for the Arts, the Honourable Simon Crean, with us, and I invite you, Minister, to address us.
Thank you very much, John, and it's a pleasure to be here today. This is a significant announcement. Truth is, there's no better sound than a symphony orchestra, and the Sydney Symphony is a world-class symphony orchestra. When one looks at the way in which it has developed, particularly in recent years, under Vladimir Ashkenazy's stewardship, when one sees the results in terms of the diversity of musical presentation, the way in which it's disseminated, and the way in which the audiences flock in, you understand the role of the conductor isn't just a relationship with the orchestra itself, but also with the audience that they're playing to. And I think the Sydney Symphony has established that very special relationship, and this announcement today, I think, is only going to strengthen it. David comes with an enormous reputation, a world-acclaimed conductor, no stranger to the Sydney Symphony Orchestra because he's performed here before. And I think the fact that the two, Vladimir and himself, are going to be associated with the ongoing growth and work of the Sydney Symphony is a great credit to both of them in recognition of their ability to work together, and the segue, the continuum, and the respect that that shows between the two of them, and that can only enhance the ongoing work of the Sydney Symphony. The other thing that I'm excited about on two fronts, because these are both areas that we're seeking to promote within the National Cultural Policy. One is the creative use of other platforms for the performances themselves, and the fact that the Sydney Symphony Orchestra was one of the first, I think, John, to have developed their own app so that their performances can be streamed live to anyone seeking to access. The opportunity through the technology is fantastic, and the fusion with other musical forms and performance forms and the application of that technology, I think that there are so many opportunities out there that I'm really looking forward to the way in which the creative spirits, if you like, access them. The second issue is the fact that the Sydney Symphony has It toured Korea successfully and Japan, but the new focus on China, I think, is terribly exciting, because I think that as we approach the development of the Asian White Paper, I have been strongly advocating the important role of cultural diplomacy. And so the opportunities that present themselves through this sort of engagement. And China is fertile ground, because the last 2 years, in fact, I think we've got the final performance next month here in Sydney, I think I'm coming up for China's Year of Culture in Australia. We had ours the year before, but this has been the biggest ever cultural exchange between ourselves and China in the space of 2 years, and we really do need to build off it with the continuing quality of content. So, congratulations to you, John, and your team. I know the orchestra is looking forward very much to the new conductor. I congratulate David for winning the appointment, and I look forward to the continued success of this wonderful symphony orchestra. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister. When we first started looking at who would come after Mr. Ashkenazy, obviously we talked a lot with our musicians about this, and it was very clear right from the start that the outstanding candidate, and very much their favourite candidate, was David Robertson. I'm very pleased that we have with us today our principal cellist, Hewgill, who's going to tell us a little bit about what this appointment means for the musicians. Catherine.
Well, I've been in the orchestra long enough to have lived through the experience of quite a few chief conductors: Stuart Challenger, Ado de Waart, Gianluigi Gelmetti, and Vladimir Ashkenazy. And I'd like to think that over time, we as musicians have matured with our orchestra and grown to know what kind of artistic leader we really need to take us into the future and to take us to another level. The whole process of starting a new relationship can be quite nerve-wracking, but I think that it's clear for us that with the appointment of David Robertson, we've found not just a great musician and conductor, but a real thinker who has very strong ideas about our musical direction, which will include more explorative programming, collaborations with great soloists. Apparently he has an amazing address book. I'm very excited about that. And I think, very importantly, a special level of communication with the audience, which we may not have seen before. When I think of David Robertson, I think of one of those really annoying people who's just good at everything. It's obvious that he has an incredible brain and takes everything very seriously, but he also loves to joke, especially in rehearsal. And I particularly remember one rehearsal in which we were working on the opening of Beethoven 5. Well, you know how it goes. Well, the story went something like this. You're having a driving lesson with your father in his brand new car, and he's parked it actually very close to a big brick wall. Anyway, he says, get in and go forward. So you put your foot on the accelerator and da-da-da-dum. The car jumps forward and comes perilously close to the brick wall, in fact, only millimetres away. The look on your father's face is not good. So just as quickly he says, quick, reverse. So you put your foot on the reverse pedal, da-da-da-dum, and back you go. And so there you have the perfect phrasing, the tension, the shape, da-da-da-dum, da-da-dum. And I've never forgotten that. The only problem with it is that now, for me, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony will always be about a driving lesson. I also have a clear memory of an unforgettable performance of John Adams's Harmony Lyra back in 2003. He makes conducting a rhythmically complex work such as this seem so easy. And I actually had a sort of out-of-body experience in the beautiful slow movement where I felt as though I was flying through and with the music. And I'm sure it was due to his seemingly effortless direction. Of course, it's a huge bonus for us musicians to know that, like Mr. Ashkenazi, David Robertson has such a big name internationally and connections with such great orchestras. We feel that Mr. Ashkenazi has drawn us closer to the rest of the world, and it seems that David Robertson will continue to do so. I know that my fellow musicians are also looking forward to working with someone who is such a great communicator, not just on a musical level, but also on a personal level. So I'll just finish by saying that all my colleagues are incredibly excited. We feel that this marriage will be a good one. I only hope that David Robertson brings as many new jokes to rehearsals as Ashkenazi does interesting T-shirts, because in the end, we all love to be entertained. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Unfortunately, David can't be with us in Sydney today for this announcement. He's currently in New York, having just finished performances of Billy Budd with the Metropolitan Opera. And tomorrow he starts rehearsals with the Met Orchestra for their concerts this week at Carnegie Hall. Yes, he's a very busy man. However, thanks to the wonders of technology, I'm going to cross my fingers at this point, we are able to cross to David now live in New York. David, welcome. Please welcome David Robertson.
Good evening.
So before we open it to the floor for questions, I thought I'd just take the opportunity of asking you the first question, David, myself, which is why the Sydney Symphony?
Well, I think the short answer is I fell in love with the Sydney Symphony. The longer side of that answer is that you fall in love in different ways and over different things. I'm still blushing a little bit from the things that Catherine said about the rehearsals and the relationship that everyone found in the music. But it's true that in 2003, when I first went to the orchestra, there was a kind of amazing chemistry communication which was just effortless. And I also remember the energy and the passion and the grace that the orchestra brought to Adam's Harmonielehrer. And we were, my wife was down there with me at the same time, and we were both struck by the just amazing spirit of the people, not only in the way that they made music, but in the way that they interacted with themselves, with the audience, and with visiting artists, because we'd never been there before. So we fell in love really with Australia, and I think the main thing that sparked that was the Sydney Symphony. But as I've gotten to know the organization better, there are other things that I've fallen in love with. For example, you can have a really great group of musicians together who have the right spirit and want to do the best things. But if they don't have the support group around them, an administration, a staff, a board of directors, who really understand just how precious this gift is and how much support it needs to be properly given to an audience and to a community, then it doesn't matter if you have really great artists. And so finding with various different projects that I'd done as a guest conductor, just how amazingly supportive and prepared and on top of things the whole team was, not just on stage but behind the stage, I started to think, wow, this is really a unique organization. There are a lot of things that most other people are not aware of that not only do they get right, they see them as essential to the functioning of the musical life. And so there was that, and then I think I can actually crystallize the point at which I realized just how much admiration I had for the musicians. I was doing, in between a couple of programs, a workshop for young conductors. And one of the things that I personally feel when you're conducting is that the real challenge is to be able to harness and use, but in a better sense than use, to really be able to unveil all of the amazing talents that are there in front of you. You have these multiple artists, all of this different intelligence, all being brought to bear on a single issue. And I think that's what I find fascinating about an orchestra. And many conductors seem to take a top-down approach as though they're the ones that are going to tell the orchestra what to do. And I was working with these conductors for them to understand that it's actually better if you can somehow manage to get all of the artists giving of themselves, and then you work at helping to steer and form that so that it's always in balance and that it's never feeling like a lack of control, but that it's this constant creativity while playing the piece. And I stood up and did a couple of little tiny demonstrations of some things that they could do with the phrase. And the flexibility that the orchestra had, for me as well as for the young conductors when they saw what the orchestra was capable of, was the kind of thing that for these young conductors I knew would be life-changing. And I was so struck by the goodness and the heart of the musicians in doing this, in between a lot of work and much repertoire, and this was stuff they weren't going to play in concerts. And they brought this kind of seriousness and this real warmth and understanding to their music making. And I think that was the point at which I, really fell head over heels. And thankfully then I was asked, if I wanted to do something a little bit longer with the orchestra, and I can't say how delighted I am. It's just a dream come true.
Oh, fabulous, David. Well, thank you very much. And it's certainly, we're very, very excited about this here as well.